Hi, I am Jenny Rushmore of Cashmere Patterns, and today I'm going to be showing you a really fun way to transform a tank top into a button front or a button back top. And stay tuned, next season I'm going to be telling you how to make a tulip back alteration as well, all from the same pattern. So I'm going to demonstrate the button back today, but exactly the same principles apply if you're going to put buttons on the front. So I'm going to start with my back piece. So it would look like this originally, and then what you need to do is tape on some paper at the edge. I happen just to have printed it like this, so I don't need to do that. And if your tank top has a yoke piece at the back, if it has a yoke, you just remove that. If it doesn't, you want to create one by drawing a line across the back and removing the top piece. And that's going to allow you to have the buttons below the yoke. So we have this piece. Now we have some measuring. So we want the button placket to be right down the middle of the back, and we're going to make the button placket 1 inch wide. So what that means is the first thing I want to do is draw in where that's going to be. So that means I need to draw a 1/2 inch either side of the existing center back. So there's my first line. And now I'm going to draw another line, another 1/2 inch either side. And if you want a narrower or a broader button placket, you can easily do that. You're just following the same kind of principle, 1/2 each side. So this is going to be our button placket. Now we want to have it folded over on the back, so we're going to add another inch from the furthest line we already drew, going all the way up there. And then finally we need a seam allowance, and I'm going to do a 1/2 inch seam allowance, so it's another 1/2 inch. And again, you know, you could do a 2 inch wide placket, you could make a really skinny placket. It's really up to you when it comes to pattern hacking. So our new piece is now extended by, in total, 2 inches from the center back. And that's going to allow us to make the button placket. Okay, so it looks like this. So the next step is you're going to cut out your tank top, and you're going to cut 2 of these backs. I have already done that. And the pieces are here. Make sure they're symmetrical. And there you go. So those are our lower backs. So the next thing we need to do is transfer the key lines that we drew on the pattern onto this. There's lots of ways you can transfer lines, but I actually just like using a chalk pen and a ruler. I'm just going to do it on one side here. So I'm going to mark the 1/2 inch seam allowance line again. You know, you can also use a serrated wheel, if you've ever seen those, and chalk paper, but I actually find this is very quick. So I'm doing a 1/2 inch line from the edge, and then 1 more inch in. Okay, so you do that on both sides. Now what I'm going to do is press. Now this fabric is the same on either side, so it doesn't matter which side the placket is. And I'm going to show you where the placket is on the outside, because I think it looks nice. So the first thing I'm doing is pressing over the 1/2 inch line. Now, if you have fabric that has a pattern on one side and is blank on the other side, you're going to need to fold to the wrong side, because you want the pattern to still be there and not show the insides. But this is the same on both sides, so it's a great option if you're using something like a chambray, which I am. So I'm just pressing over at the 1 inch. So I pressed over 1/2 inch, press over 1 inch. Okay. One thing I really like using when I make this top is this kind of double-sided tape, which is made especially for sewing. And you can use it to do things like fix down button plackets before you sew them. And it's made especially for use in sewing machines, so it doesn't gum up your needle. I use this for all kinds of things. So I'm just going to press it down, and you can see now it can't move. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to edge stitch right at the very edge of both sides of the placket, so it's going to look like a traditional shirt. So over to the sewing machine. Now, if you can, I highly recommend having an edge stitching foot, which is the kind of foot that I have in the machine now. In fact, if you only have one unusual foot, this is the foot I would recommend. And what it does is it has a blade in the very center, and you keep the fabric right next to that blade. You move the needle over, and what it lets you do is get an incredibly straight, close stitch to the edge without wavering on and off. I know when I started sewing, I couldn't understand how people were managing to get such good stitching on their shirts, and I thought everyone must just be incredibly skilled compared to me. But no, it turns out that an edge stitching foot is incredibly helpful. So I'm gonna just did that one side, and this is what it looks like. Okay, I have already done both sides already, so you can take a look. So we have one, and we have two. Let me get rid of this one. And so this is having completed that step on both sides, and you can see the edge stitching on both of them. The next step is making buttonholes. So I'm going to make buttonholes on the right-hand side. It's up to you. It's on the back. There is no right and wrong way. And I'm going to use this really fun gadget which expands and lets you mark your buttonholes. So I'm going to do 5 buttonholes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm going to place it on here, and they're perfectly even. And then what you just do is mark through the gadget your 5 buttonholes. Okay, back over to the sewing machine, and we're going to do the first buttonhole. So buttonholes are slightly different on every sewing machine. On this one, you have a buttonhole foot where you have to put the button you're going to use on the end, like so. You then have to pull a little lever down and place it there. And every single sewing machine is slightly different. It's always a good idea to practice first, because you can get very confused about how it works. So practice on some scraps. I'm going to place it down, and we shall go for it. So this is an automatic buttonholer, so you can see, don't actually even have to hold the fabric and it will work. Sometimes you might have a 4-step buttonhole, that's a little bit different. And sometimes you also have to measure the button on the machine. So you really just want to do a little bit of research and figure out how you're going to do it first. Okay, so there I have one beautiful buttonhole. Next step, attaching the yoke. So we want to make sure that the side with the buttonholes is facing out when you're wearing it. So we're going to place that on top. Then we're going to place the yoke on top of this. So we're making a sandwich. So it's not buttonholed one, then the buttonholed one, then the yoke. We're going to pin across here. And then we're going to sew this seam. Okay, back to the sewing machine. Going to go back to a regular foot. So there's a little bit of backwards and forwards with the feet here, but it's pretty easy on this machine. Back to a straight stitch. And I'm just going to sew across all 3. I'm going to make sure that they're all getting caught in there. Yes. And I'm going to sew the seam. Okay, just go straight through. You want to make sure none of the pieces is slipping, and you want to make sure that the buttonhole placket is on top. You can even use a bit more of that sticky tape actually to make sure that it works fine. And then you would need to finish the seam allowance. So depends on what you prefer. You can use a serger, it'll look very professional. You can also use pinking shears. You could even do a French seam. So now we have the yoke there, sewn on. And we're nearly done. So I'm going to show you the one that I previously did and I finished. So that's the stage we just got to. And I serged and pressed it up. And then the final piece is simply sewing on your buttons. So, you know, these are decorative, they're not really functional, so you can really put whatever you want. It's something that's incredibly fun and creative. You can put it on the back or the front, and once you have this back piece, you just sew the rest of the pattern, and you're all done. So I hope you enjoyed seeing it. I think there's tons of possibility for creative looks, and have fun.